Let's take a look now at the use of WhatsApp messages as evidence for arguments at the tribunal with ICT lawyer, internet governance and public policy expert, advocate Zanyiwe Ntatisi Asare. Good morning. Welcome to Newzroom Afrika. Thank you so much for your time.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Now, this case, let's dive into the complexities of using text and social media messages. The case revolves around text messages, social media interactions. How crucial is it to establish the authenticity of these communications?
I think, we've come a long way when it comes to the legal realm from, once upon a time, digital evidence not being admissible to it actually being something that weighs just as heavy as traditional types of evidence from an evidentiary law perspective. But the same rules apply. If there is any kind of, let's say, tampering involved, that would be something that would weigh negatively to that evidence and ultimately rule it inadmissible. If there's any kind of, evidence that is one-sided, so all of the rules still apply. So really, I think the word that you just said now, the authenticity of it, not just the evidence itself, but the circumstances surrounding whatever is submitted.
All right. And then can you elaborate on the legal challenges of proving the content of text messages and social media posts that they haven't been altered or manipulated?
So, when we look at this particular instance, we look at, I think, way beyond just the altering and manipulation. Let's first start with, the discrepancies in the chronological order and saying there's certain things that were missing and only submitting one-sided evidence. I think the screenshots that were submitted, this is quite an interesting case that were provided, tell one story. And as we all know, with WhatsApp and a lot of social media platforms right now, you can delete what you've said. So this doesn't allow the tribunal itself or any legal setting where you're trying to get some kind of conclusion, the full story. So that's the one side of it. Then we look at, we've had this in South Africa, for instance, the Geldenhuys case, where we're looking at how important it is to ensure that you verify metadata in this particular instance. And this is information that you can find, just on a picture, on a message. So those things are quite important to give a holistic view to whoever is presiding over the matter.
Now, given that the potential for manipulation exists, how should courts approach the interpretation of text messages and social media content in legal proceedings?
Look, I think it's very important for courts to still push on to verify. You can't take things at face value. I think there was once a time where WhatsApp could not do that, and we're all aware of that. And submitting anything of that nature, submitting a string of messages and communique would be sufficient. We know that the first thing that we think about, when I take off my hat as an expert in the realm, I would say, okay, why don't we go to Meta? We've got a head office here. Why don't we ask them to give us that information? But there's just so many stringent rules and regulations and also policies that the likes of Meta adhere to ensure that you as a user feel confident to use this, know that there's a level of confidentiality that makes WhatsApp what it is. It makes it an attractive, protected platform. Also with end-to-end encryption, they typically say, look, it's very, very stringent circumstances that would allow us to give you this kind of information. So when it comes to this particular case, it's important more than ever now to set the kind of precedent that in itself is not sufficient. If the two phones don't tally, because that would be something that they would request into evidence, they don't tally, then we know that you've just, watered down your case, even if what you're saying is indeed true.
Now, staying on the case, considering the nature of the allegations against Judge President Mbenenge, now what unique challenges does this case present in terms of interpreting digital communication?
Look, I think it's such a mix of elements, and that's why I'm saying it's a very interesting case. We live in a country, we know aspects of sexual harassment, are really real. In the work environment, we know the power dynamics that play out every day. We see it, even outside of the professional realm, just on a physical basis, men are typically stronger than women, the rape statistics. So those are real things that we need to consider in the country. We can't run away from that. When we look at this particular case, at least, my viewpoint here is the nature of the conversations, admitting to, the communicating specific, acts. I wouldn't say sexual acts, but communicating certain words and things that could be read as someone who is, who she's into it. And that's not something that you'd want to put forward. So that's one thing that we need to consider when looking at this case. The other part of it is really looking at, the he said, she said in this instance, that it's quite difficult to triangulate the information without getting the authorities involved, without getting forensic experts involved, and without, trying to get whether it is information from the network providers, I think outside of even the realm of WhatsApp, on when they allege that they were in certain areas and certain places, can they indeed come back with this information, triangulate it, and support, what the victim is alleging?
Now, this case has been rather interesting to observe, because we're not just dealing with words. Now we're dealing with emojis now. As people, we use and interpret emojis differently. So in your opinion, what are the most important factors to consider when interpreting emojis in a legal context?
I think this is the coolest question anyone has ever asked me, by the way. It's really about a context, like we said, understanding the context, understanding, and really going into, I guess, colloquial culture, understanding what these particular emojis mean. Now, I believe, when we look at this particular case, there's an age difference here. People of different ages, of different backgrounds, of different viewpoints interpret and utilize different words in ways that communicate and sometimes vastly different things. So it's really about understanding the individuals that are involved, who are sending these messages to each other, and really paying attention to this, background, this context that I talk about. But in most instances, emojis or pictures or videos, short clips of a sexual nature, sexual innuendo, are quite telling, and they expose themselves. And I think in those instances, we have to be honest to what's in front of us. We need to look at it with that lens, because there will be certain things that mean certain things, and everybody knows it. So I think that's really my take on that particular aspect of this case.
And while we still have you, I'd like to pick your brain on a completely separate case. Recently in Swaziland, a woman was arrested for allegedly viewing her husband's WhatsApp messages. Now, do you see this case as an overreach of the law or a necessary step in protecting cybersecurity?
You know what? I think it's a necessary step in exploring the relationship between the usage of cell phones, communication platforms, whether it's Instagram, WhatsApp, looking at platforms that connect individuals. Now, I say that because if you think about the omnes vitae, if you think about the marriage itself, there's certain expectations traditionally and certain expectations even currently that partners and spouses have towards each other. And now we've got, cyber crime acts. Actually, we've got the Malabo Convention that really looks at placing this background on data protection and cybersecurity across the continent. And I think it's a necessary step for us to explore. What is more private? Is it your body and your private parts, or is it, your cell phone? I think it's a good step for us to start exploring that further. However, if we go back, to just the law itself and cybersecurity and data protection, I think it is, if we have to be black and white about it, factually speaking, it is an invasion of privacy. And indeed, that's where now this conversation needs to start, because the marriage, this thing that society upholds, this thing that the law upholds, also needs to be explored a bit further in the sense of this, where do we draw the line, and what is black and white, and where does a spouse or a partner in this instance get access and doesn't? And I know a lot of jurists might be looking at me right now and saying, what? But I think a lot of the moral decay and a lot of the societal breakdowns actually are based on the fact that we look at things in a very black and white manner, and we don't look at the two people involved.
And in closing, what are your thoughts on the future of digital evidence in court, particularly with the increasing use of social media and messaging platforms? And what advice would you give to individuals who find themselves involved in legal proceedings that rely heavily on digital communication as evidence?
I think it's exciting to see that we've really embraced technology. If you look at the caliber of the people involved, the age groups, they're two vastly different people. So it's really good to see that we acknowledge that this is a real thing. We're in the digital era. We're not talking about it theoretically. What's also good is we're seeing that in as much as we have signed up or written a bunch of rules and regulations on what is admissible and not admissible from an evidentiary law perspective, we're starting to develop that as well, more intricately on the digital side of things. So that's quite exciting. My advice for anybody who is in this particular position is just, tell the whole truth, draft the whole picture. Don't be one-sided about it. These things happen, and these things could be either side of the coin. Once you come in and you try and place the other party in a negative light, you open the door for yourself to be scrutinized even further. So it's really to your advantage to give forward the full picture and ensure that you're truthful at all times.